coming at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, you will agree that the country has to prepare itself. So what government has been doing is preparing itself. Both government and the private sector that are investing in these projects. The preparation government has done is that it has prepared the institutional framework. It is no longer just the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Development, but they have separated the policy aspects from the regulatory aspects, which are done by the Petroleum Authority of Uganda, and the commercial aspects, which are done by the National Oil Company. That institutional development is very important, especially if you're going to take forward projects of that magnitude. That is happening. The laws have also been in place. The private sector also is undertaking preparation for these projects. Many of you will know that land acquisition for these projects is ongoing, both for the oil fields, where the infrastructure for developing the oil field is going to be done, but also for the pipeline, the export pipeline that will be going from Hoima to Tanga in Tanzania, but also for the Kingfisher projects. So the private sector investors are undertaking preparatory activities like the land acquisition. My colleague from NEMA has just referred to the ongoing environmental and social impact assessment public hearing that is going on for the Kingfisher project. That was completed for the Tilenga project a few months back. It is now being done for the Kingfisher project, and then it is going to be done for the export pipeline. So that environmental aspect is also being undertaken. The third aspect preparatory that is being done by the investors is it's called geotechnical. You really have to assess the areas where this infrastructure is going to be built so that you confirm that these areas can indeed accommodate that infrastructure. That activity is also ongoing and it is due to be completed. So these are the preparatory aspects that need to be done for the oil and gas sector to progress. The other one that the public would probably want to hear a lot about is the decision to make this investment, because the companies have to, unlike many of the projects we are talking about, the investment for these projects is not coming from the treasury directly, apart from the preparatory aspect, but it is being brought in by investors. So the government has a role to play in order to take these forward, but also the investors have roles and decisions to make in taking these decisions forward. What we are waiting for now is for the investors to take the final investment decisions, and you will appreciate that for these decisions to be taken, these preliminary works had to be done. If you were not sure you had land, you didn't expect anybody to take a final investment decision. If the environmental and social impact assessments were not progressed to the level they are now, no one would take an investment decision. If you were not sure that the ground could hold this equipment, you probably wouldn't take an investment decision. So it's actually opportune that these now are being concluded and they are to the positive and they are going forward. So we do expect that the final investment decisions for these projects will be taken forward, and then the major activities will be taken forward, will be implemented. I would like, before I conclude, to say something about what happens when the final investment decision is taken forward. Many people refer to the oil and gas sector and look at its benefit as being revenue that will come from selling the crude oil. If the people in this room forget everything I have said, they should not forget the fact that the benefits of the oil and gas sector are broader than the revenue we shall get from selling the crude oil. The investment that is expected, as I have counted it, amounts to $20 billion coming into this country in the next 3 to 5 years. It is in the interest of everybody in this country that Uganda domiciles as much of that investment in this country as possible. Therefore, the amount of value that Uganda gets out of that 20 billion is a significant benefit to this country. And it is in addition to the revenue that we shall get. The other one is the impact and the relationship the sector is having on other sectors of the economy and the opportunity it has for them to grow. As we speak now, those of you who go to Hoima will know that over the last 6 months, it's probably extremely difficult to find accommodation in Hoima. You can therefore appreciate the extent to which the tourism industry is a significant beneficiary to this sector. The sector expects about 20,000 foreign workers coming into the country and to work in the country for about 4 or 5 years. Many of you will remember that CHOGM brought about 2,000 visitors to this country for a period of 1 week. You remember how much we prepared for CHOGM, and therefore you should imagine how much more we should prepare for these people. And many of the guests of CHOGM, I think government probably facilitated their stay in the country. But these 20,000 who are coming will not need any government support in terms of whatever. So it's an opportunity. So the linkages between the oil and gas sector and the other sectors of the economy, that is just tourism. The other aspects of agriculture, housing, and so on and so on, they are also being looked at. And it's also been established that the benefit of doing these linkages very well is not less valuable than the revenue the country will get from the oil and gas sector. So this period is being used to prepare the country so that we actually achieve these benefits. If these preparations are not made, these things could pass by and we'll miss them, and we'll just keep looking at the benefits that will come from selling the crude oil, which will be a very significant loss to this country. So, Madam Moderator, that's all I think I needed to share by saying where we are and where we are going. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ernest Rubondo, the Executive Director, Petroleum Authority. Although you kept mentioning billions in dollars, and I saw people opening their eyes wide open, how we will be able to get there, but probably, hopefully. Now, I want the panelists, of course, to wrap up. In the next few minutes, I'll give about 2 minutes to each panelist, but I will request that I start with Mr. Mugume from the extreme right, and I'll have Mr. Ochailap wrapping up as being the last one. URA will be the second last.
Thank you. I think the most important thing to summarize the whole thing is looking at what also participants were asking is about exporting. Whether you talk about income per capita, you get Uganda shilling equivalent of GDP divided by the dollar after, taking care of the population. Supposing the dollar depreciated by, say, 20%, even the $800 dollars we are talking about per person, per household, will actually become less. So the most important thing, therefore, is when you're talking about this per capita income is, and all the activities we're talking about industrialization, the vital component is ability to do exporting. Whether you are doing industrialization without exporting will not lead us anywhere. We all know farms that export employ many people, are more efficient, and they pay better wages. And so that's the way to go. So as we think about this industrialization, commercialization of agriculture, I like the argument of the other gentleman who said about fruits in Soroti. I think that's the way to go. And that's how we are going to improve also our per capita income. And I think probably I need to end on is, when we talk about domestic borrowing, it is not only Ugandans who buy the treasury bills, also have foreigners who participate in that market. At one time, the share of foreigners were about 14%. Now it has come down to around 8%. So the problem is not about much domestic borrowing. Actually, is what civil society had said is supplementary budgets. For example, if you have planned very well, like last year, we had the domestic borrowing by issuing securities of 2.1, but you see actually interest rate came down. Why? We only had one supplementary that increased domestic borrowing. In the previous years, we would have as many as 4. Now, that's where there is a problem. Because if you tell the market that we are going to borrow 2.5 and we stick on that, even the foreigners know the calendar, they will plan for it. So if you issue treasury bill, some of them will buy it. So the impact on interest rate will not be high as when you are only coming in disruptively. And I think that is really very crucial. So overall, I think we should not hate much about domestic borrowing, because even you talk about foreign debt, and as I said, the exchange rate gives way. Supposing the exchange rate continues the way it used to depreciate by 8%, and you have $8 billion worth of debt, your debt goes through the roof. So it is very, very deadly to be attracted by dollars mainly so on commercial basis. And that's why I say that going for concession loans, the way ministry has been doing it, is the best way. Overall, I think, as I said, Uganda has the potential to grow. All the basic framework for growth, higher growth than what we are having now, are already laid. So the most important thing is, can we implement the activities that we have planned to do? Once we do that, then really, I think we can have what we're talking about as high per capita income of $1,200.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Badagawa, please.
One thing that we'll pay attention as we implement this budget is frugality. Frugality means that you're paying attention to savings. As an individual, as government, as private sector, if we can't save, we cannot invest. Now, if the theme is about industrialization for job creation, we need to generate sufficient resources for our people to borrow, but also long-term funding. So we have to save for the future. That is very important, and as private sector, we have been crying out for a review of the NSSF Act so that we invite more savings. The informal sector that's not saving today, because the law requires that you can only save if you are 5 employees and above. Now, many of us in the SME sector are employing less than 5, and therefore we are not obliged to save. So these, among other things, are the reasons that we want to review this act, so that we mobilize more domestic long-term resources. That's one. 2, Adam mentioned that if we cannot look at markets, export markets, then forget about industrialization, really. Because the market in Uganda is very small for our industrial base. And so we are looking at the region. And we have gone far and wide and attracted investors to this country, promising them of a wider market in the region, 160 million people, so we say. So we cannot afford to lose markets in the north, in Juba. We are no longer going to Juba. We are no longer going to Rwanda. DRC has Ebola. Everything around us is a problem. And so industries today are operating at less than 50% capacity utilization, less than 50%, because there is no local demand, and where we were going, we have been stopped. I had thought that the rejoinder to the budget, His Excellency would have mentioned something about Rwanda, but he did not. Markets are closing around us. We need to pay attention to that. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
The way Gideon talks about how markets are closing around us, you know, it's real, by the way. It's real. But I just have 2 points to make, and quickly. One of them is, we are talking about opportunities in the budget, but I'm also, I think, addressing my fellow citizens that this is also an opportunity for citizens to engage effectively in the budget process. This is the first time we have got the PSST for 6 hours to sit and articulate the national budget to the citizens.
Yes.
And I think I commend this PSST, not only for doing this, but also for being brave enough that we can sit together on the same table, agree to disagree, agree to agree, but for purposes of improving the budget process. And I think for me that is very important. And I'm seeking, again, your commitment that the next financial year, we can also do this better. To my fellow citizens, the challenges ahead of the budget implementation are real. But I think the most important benefit we have received is that, one, we have the right information, budget information, and that when we go out to monitor the way budget is going to be implemented, we know what we are monitoring, and we should be able to provide the right information. Thank you very much.
All right, Mr. Chilanyak, you can answer briefly a few of the questions left and then wind up.
Okay, thank you again. Maybe I'll start from where Mr. Badagawa talked about the issue of the cement and steel. Well, what I should say is a good idea, but it's important for us to note that last 2 years ago, we did some work in this area. What we did was we said, look, if you are supplying a government project, most of these projects which are going on, the infrastructure, the roads and so on, the contractor would be deemed to have paid the VAT. So the effect of that is the companies which are manufacturing the cement and the steel do not have to charge the VAT. So there's something that has been done in that area, but it's a good idea, it can be moved forward. The second point that I would like to speak into is the issue of the incentives being awarded to foreign and citizens. The question was, why was it revised further downwards? And simply the work that was done between URA, the ministry, and the parliament was more concerned about the fact that if you're saying a citizen should raise 10 million USD, how many Ugandans can be able to raise this kind of money? So this is why it came down to what it is right now. Because even the foreign companies were struggling to raise the 100 million USD. So this is the reason why this was scaled down. Thirdly, the issue of licenses and renewal, yes, a very good idea. It's something that we can move forward. The fact that after you've been registered, the next year when you come and you apply for a license to maybe continue doing your law firm or maybe whatever profession you're doing, then probably we should request you to give us a tax clearance certificate, which shows that you've actually been complying with your tax obligations. So it's a very good idea, something that we should consider. Thirdly, and probably lastly, the issue of, it was raised by the teacher, I didn't, the soldier who is the teacher. Thank you for bringing up the issues. Completely, the issue really I think is, first of all, maybe we should do, government should find a way of advertising what we are doing with the money, because that is the message that came out. Because obviously we know, all of us can see that government is doing a lot of work. You can see in roads, you can see in electricity, you can see in hospitals. Government is doing work. But maybe the issue is, how do we push this kind of information to the public that, look, this is what your taxes are doing. Because even if you said that some of this money is aid money and so on, at the end of the day, the taxes are the ones which pay this what? This debt. So the best thing probably is for us to work very hard as government and try to advertise and show the public what we're doing with the money. There's some work which was done, like for example, 2 weeks ago, I think you realized that there was a budget week, and in that budget week, there was showcase of government ministries and what they are doing with the money. And so for you who went to Kololo at that time, you should be able to appreciate that the work that government is doing. Then lastly, and probably to wrap up from URA is probably an announcement that June is coming around the corner. Filing of returns, income tax returns for corporations and individuals is on 30th June 2019, or every year. And the problem this year is it's actually falling on a Sunday. So make sure that you file your returns in time and to avoid the penalties and the interest. Thank you very much.
That definitely had to come through. And finally, wrapping up on the questions and giving us your wrap-up, Mr. Chailap.
Thank you, moderator, and colleague panelists for this exciting and very well-focused discussion. And to you, moderator, for guiding the discussions very well. I think I'll answer some 2 questions before I wrap up. Question number 1 is the risk factors asked by the ED of NEMA. Certainly, we have risks in everything that we do in life, and the budget is not part of those which are excluded. The risk factor that comes to mind is certainly the issue that Mr. Badagawa mentioned. If the markets continue reducing in the region, then that's a very big risk for our exports, and therefore the incentives or the initiatives that we are doing with respect to improving or linking agriculture to industry and then to export and so on. If diseases like Ebola continue ravaging the bigger parts of our markets, the other side, that's certainly a very big risk. Internally, if we fail on revenue targets, that's a very big risk, which will force government either to cut the little money that you have got so far in NEMA, for example, or, which I don't want to mention, is to look at the possibility where we cannot postpone the expenditures of adjusting the budget by going to Parliament for additional domestic borrowing, which I hate, in the course of the financial year. The fourth risk that I see is if sectors fail to implement the projects as planned as a contribution to the growth, because government projects are part of the equation in the growth that we are talking about. Implementation, therefore, of all development programs, of course together with recurring programs, is a very big factor that I look forward to in terms of attaining the growth levels as well as the development objectives that we have set ourselves in. Your second question was alignment to NDP. Yes, I think, as you know, it's a requirement under the law for National Planning Authority to give assessment of how aligned the budget proposals are to the NDP. And that was done. And I think this year, next financial year, the alignment was assessed to be, I think, between 65% to 70%. 70%. In some cases, actually, we have overshot the targets of NDP 2 this financial year. For example, I think in agriculture, we've surpassed what NDP 2 talked about, and some areas of investments we have gone beyond, and some flagship projects have been completed well ahead of the NDP 2 target. But on aggregate, is in excess of 70% achievement or alignment to the NDP. Adam has dealt with the statistics and how you derive the GDP, and I think we shall also set up further discussions on some of the so-called areas at a later date. The last comment I wanted to make, because of the sensitivity to the gender issues, with respect to the food rights lady, who was totally annoyed with our emphasis on infrastructure. And she gave an example that if electricity went off today, would 75% of the people feel the effect of electricity having gone. They'll be badly hit. Why? Because the production base, which raises the revenue, and also which helps us borrow a little to invest in the health centers where the majority of those people are, will not be attained. So I'll have shortfalls of medicine. I'm sorry about the lady who collapsed and almost delivered on a bad road. I'm not saying that all roads are done, not yet, not yet, well, very far. In fact, you are urging me now to add more money to the roads the other financial year, so that all roads are okay. They'll be badly hit because we shall not supply medicines to you people in the rural areas, despite the fact that you're in agricultural sector 70%, and you are contributing only 3-point-something% to the GDP. There are other issues that are coming to you in form of transfer from the center that you cannot afford if we cannot provide. I've told you medicine will disappear from the hospitals. I'll not be able to give you medicine because I don't have money. I'm not earned from these people of URA. You'll not be able to send your children to UPE, however good or however arranged it is. You'll not be able to, for example, be able to buy soap. The price of soap will go up, so you'll not wash your clothes. You'll not be able to do, so even the price of salt will go up because I don't have money to control the inflation from the other side, because I'll have to now start panic planning. So it disorganizes the entire planning process. And electricity, by the way, even what we are talking is being relayed live. These people earn a living from that. The supermarkets where you are selling, when you go to the market on Tuesday or whatever day it is in your village, you'll not be able to, business people will not simply come to your place because they don't have anywhere, when they buy your produce, there's nowhere to sell them. But now, as you heard the minister say, 45% of the products in the shelves in the markets are from you people. This is 68%. So this budget is trying to address the mismatch between the 68% of the people in subsistence agriculture contributing only 3.8% to the GDP growth. And that's why they are not having a growth of GDP in their pockets, because their contribution to that overall number is certainly less. And that's the anomaly that this budget is trying to address in fact, starting from the two financial year budget, by looking at how to do industrialization linked to the value chain for agriculture, where 68% are. So that mechanism, transmission mechanism, is the one which will send a signal for you then to tap into the flow. And I'm very happy Ernest Rubondo even put to the equation with respect to the oil industry, because part of the budget is going to oil roads. So the investment there is complete. But once it's complete, what does it mean for the entire economy with respect to other non-oil benefits?